All right, we'll try to make this as short as possible, so not a lot of extra. But don't try this at home, drinking over the top of a computer. All right. Just do as I say, not as I do, right? Anyway, Ray RQ is an angle bisector. Set up the equation. So it's something we've done before, so let's do it quick. X plus 40 would be equal to 3x minus 20. That would be how you set it up. How do we know? Well, these one side represents PRQ. The other side represents the measure of QRS, angle QRS, and they're equal. So we set them equal. We're not going to solve for X. Just said to set it up. You really wanted to solve that, didn't you? You really wanted to give me that answer. Moving on. Oh, it just feels terrible to do that. U.S. perimeter. U.S. I don't know. Using perimeter area circumference. Boom. All right, I'm going to quickly go through there. Students will apply formulas for area, perimeter, and circumference. Those are your three main words to make sure you understand, because they come up in all the time, really, in various concepts. All right, so perimeter, sum of the side of the lengths of a figure. So squares, rectangles, triangles are the most common figures. So there you go. So the most basic way to look at that is just like, I'm just going to add up all the sides. Now, you're usually only given two sides of a rectangle, but you're supposed to assume that the opposite sides are the same. But I'm just putting them all out there so you can see it. So to find the perimeter, another way you could think of that is like, well, 5 plus 5 plus 4 plus 4, that's the same as 2 times the width plus 2 times the length. Or you could just add the length and width and multiply it by 2. So anyway you work it out, those are my 3 ways I could work it out. You're going to get 18. But most of the time we're not given the nice little grids to count the units, and so we have to know the formulas. So there's your 2 formulas right there. You can use either one. As long as you know the length and the width, you can plug that in and figure it out. All right? There you go. So distance around, remember around, not that number of squares. Distance around. So we just say units or feet or whatever the units are, inches. Area is the number of square units. So that's actually how many squares, not the distance around. So that's why it's called area represents square units. So if you have a question that says how many square units of something is there, you're finding the area. So when you use the area formula, so if you could actually count those out, since it's on a grid, it's 20. Count them each one at a time. But most of the time we just multiply 5 times 4. All right, length and width. Sometimes it's referred to as base times height, because the base, you have a perpendicular from a vertex down, just kind of like in a triangle. Makes a right angle here on the edge. So yeah, all right. So that's a height times the base, or the height times the base, which is 5 there. All right, so it's another way to think of it, base times height. 20 square feet. The FT with a 2 there, that means feet squared. A lot of times you hear it say 20 feet squared. Well, it's really not. It's kind of misleading sometimes if you don't understand what it's talking about. When you're talking about area, it just literally means 20 square feet. So it's not 20 times 20 like you would often think of. It actually is just a notation on feet. So, and we're talking about area, that exponent doesn't mean 20 times 20. And every other time it is. Just something to remember. All right. Base is the bottom, usually, but it doesn't have to be. If you look over here, the base is on the side. The key is, the determinant of base is you have a segment from a vertex to the end, and if it forms a right angle, and then that side is a base. So if it forms a right angle, so most of the time we like to put them on the bottom. We think the base is the bottom, and most applications when you're building something or whatever, the base is the bottom. All right. So the height is also called an altitude. All right. Always forms a right angle with the base. That's the main thing there. Diameter is the length across the center. All right. With endpoints on the end, the radius is a segment whose endpoints are the center and a point on the circle. And just something to remember, a radius is drawn from the very center, and the circle is drawn from the radius. So if I were to actually have a little pin on that, and I just move that radius around, the whole circle is going to be equidistant. Every point on that circle is equidistant. So if that's the center, the diameter is going to be twice as long as the radius. So if you know the diameter, you can figure out the radius. If you know the radius, you should be able to figure out the diameter. So if the radius was 10, the diameter would be 20. All right, and vice versa. 20, the diameter, radius 10. All right. Circumference is simply the distance around the circle. So like if you were to if you had a track that was in the exact shape of a circle, it's the distance around from beginning to the other, like a full lap around. All right? How far did you go? So to calculate the distance around a circle, which is called the circumference, we know of a formula. So it's pi times diameter, and I like to put the pi after, so diameter times pi. Another way to think of it is 2 times the radius is the same as the diameter. So these are your two formulas here. All right. So if you're given the diameter, you can do 18 times pi, because here the diameter is given if you look. All right. The radius is also 9, so we could also say 2 times 9 times pi. When you calculate it, you get 56.25 inches approximately around. All right. Area formula is pi times the radius squared, so you got to know the radius. So if you're given the diameter, like in this one, it's 18 inches. Don't put 18 in for r, because that's not what that is. That's the diameter. I want to put 9 in, right? So 8. So if I plug in a 9 where the r is, that's 8 pi times 9 squared, which is 81. And then pi times 81 is about 254.34 square inches. Not to the second power, just square inches. That's just a notation on the unit of measure, just to represent, hey, there's so many squares. It's a lot of squares that are, all right. So area of and perimeter, the perimeter of a triangle is just simply adding the outside sides. So A plus B plus C is your perimeter. The area of a triangle is the base times the height. So you see the height and the base, like in the previous. If you multiply those and then divide by 2, that gives you the area. You sometimes see it also written right here, if you look, 1/2 times base times height. Mathematically, it comes out the same way. So it's just a different way to say it. So if I were to calculate the base times height, I would do the base is 8.7 times 5.4 there. That's equal to, divide that all by 2, that gives you, sorry, I got that backwards there, 23.49 square centimeters. That's using the area formula, base times height over 2. And then the perimeter is just adding 6.2, 9.3, plus 8.7, the 3 sides around, that's the perimeter. So don't get those confused. And when we're doing the area, we don't need those other 2 sides. We just need the height and the base. So don't plug in 9.3, well, that's not the height. The height, by definition, is from the vertex to the bottom. And if it doesn't give you a right angle, and it gives you that little thing, assume it's the height. Technically, they should have a right angle there, but just assume it's the height, okay? And that's it, guys. Enjoy the refresher. Do a couple practice problems, and we're going to move on.